Good day, everyone. Troy Rawlings here with the Meet the Show in LA Media Now Studios about, or we'll just say in March 2020. This is a historic time in history. This has never happened, unprecedented. Coronavirus, COVID-19, quarantine. At the beginning of it, we had an opportunity to interview Kamose Muhammad, CEO and founder of Freedom Paper Company. Since then, it's been a horribly spectacular dynamic of things that took place. In one case, Freedom Paper Company is one of the main companies that had essential products that some people were already ordering, but this was a small business, micro business in some cases, that all of a sudden had a 1,500% increase in business, somewhere along those lines, and they survived. We're going to interview Brother Kamose Muhammad right now. How are you, sir?
Greetings, brother. How are you?
I'm good. And thank you for taking this exclusive. I know you haven't interviewed with any news outlets yet or any people like that. You've been pretty much head down working. This is going to be well, I'll get to the point. This is going to be not as long as your average interview because, for one, time constraints. What's going on at the factory is amazing things is going on, but we're going to get to some of the nitty gritty. We did the interview and we got some people that had backlash. We had customers that had issues. We had people that thought Freedom Paper Company was great. What brought it to my attention when I started getting hits on the news people were talking about different things. And I actually interviewed Kamose Muhammad because I knew Kamose Muhammad through a contact and what he was working on in the community, especially the Baltimore, Maryland, East Coast, up and down, traveling, everything. So I knew his validity. Freedom Paper Company has been in existence for a decade. Impeccable service, a great mission to the community, which we'll talk about a little bit. But I'm gonna jump right into it. We don't have a lot of time. And first off, it was funny. When exactly did you see the surge? What happened overall? Because we talked in March and you were already like all this stuff and we're here and we see the increase in this, that, and other. But something, I guess right around the time we did the first interview, something happened. What happened in your best way you can describe it?
Well, if you don't mind, Troy, I want to, for those who really don't know a lot about Freedom Paper Company, and through these last 6 months, there have been a lot of people that we've never seen before that became customers. And right. We know that in some senses, that's part of maybe why some of the confusion and some of the type of comments came in the midst of all that was going on. But let me always start as I should, giving all praise to the Most High and the ancestors, in particular for keeping my family, the Freedom family, our workers, our staff, generally safe throughout this whole COVID-19 pandemic situation with all its ins and outs and ups and downs. We did actually, Troy, have one worker who worked in one of our offices actually contracted the virus. Fortunately, he did not get, dreadfully ill and that sort of thing. We had some near misses, we thought, even in the warehouse where, and we had to send workers to be tested, put them on quarantine. So people need to really understand the great seriousness of COVID-19, the pandemic, the situation, all of its real effects. And as a business, a small business, as you highlighted, now being here for 10 years, Troy, we never had one formal complaint, one formal complaint in 10 years. And a lot of people during this situation, because a number of systems fell apart, literally. And this didn't just take place with small companies, people need to know. But even some of the giants certainly had major glitches. They weren't necessarily seen in the same way because they're major multi-billion dollar corporations who have huge amounts of staff, like computer engineers working 24 hours a day. And so when they had glitches, they were, able to relatively quickly get on board. But trust and believe me that
I
people
want
did notice, because it might have been a million people who experienced that one glitch that they did have.
right. And I want to say something about this, and I have to thank you again. And we're gonna get into some deep stuff. Normally interviews, I'm praising people, I'm giving all this stuff. We're gonna get into some deep stuff because we're gonna hit on a couple questions. But I want to say I gotta thank you. And we don't do, for those of you that are waiting for some kind of Clash of the Titans. No, I know this businessman, and I'm taking time to do this because I know businesses that went under. And somehow in the midst of this, and I have to hit on a couple of things. You mentioned some other big companies, when Clorox comes around and says, well, we'll be back to normal in September, October, and stuff like that. And I know people, let me streamline a couple key things I want to get out the way, because some people probably like, what about this? Freedompapercompany.com is the website. That's where you can make your orders, things like that. Freedom Paper Company had a Facebook page. One of the first things that I saw people were addressing was the fact that the Facebook page was closed down. This is not the first time Kamose Muhammad and I have talked, and I addressed issues as people were hitting me up because they saw the interview. They shut down the Facebook page and the initial commenting and everything on the Instagram page during the time, because the Facebook page had been running for a while and no one was monitoring it. So people who had any kind of discrepancies was going there, and it started becoming malicious if you don't have anybody answering. And also when people are spinning their wheels and nothing, they had technical breakdowns with their customer service system. They had technical breakdowns with their website shut down and their delivery system shut down. So what? And this is, it sounds crazy saying
it was a major catastrophe.
It's a major catastrophe.
The entire world is experiencing, still to this day, a major catastrophe. That is absolutely what has to be understood.
Yeah, I mean, there are people that I know that worked, 6 and 7 figure, making great money. They can't even go back to work because they're homeschooling, and they don't, it's so the whole thing is crazy. So with that portion said, I wanted to touch on that because there was, well, first off, let's talk about, like I said, with the social media, they streamline everything so that people would call directly. Then then immediately you said one of the first things that happened was we had to cut staff. And you're micro to small business, meaning that your staff was 5 to 7 people initially?
Yes. So we've had, over the last 10 years, basically on average, about 7 people who work for us directly. We've had a number of contractors and so forth. And we have some other distributors and et cetera. But as I mentioned earlier, we were affected by this pandemic as well. We have families, we're human beings. And on top of everything else, we had to follow the mandates as they were being learned as to how to control the environment so that workers could be safe. A lot of people might remember that there were a few companies that received some backlash from their workers because the workers didn't feel safe working in warehouse type environments. We have that kind of environment. We were in close proximity to each other. So one of the big things that we had to do was figure out how we're going to keep working, and how we're going to keep people safe.
Now,
I got to say this real quick.
Yes.
We do have some really fantastic customers. There's some customers, and I greatly appreciate them. And I thank them truly. And I appreciate everyone, new customers, customers that have known us for 10 years, who have stuck it out with us, who are trying to be considerate, trying to be understanding. I want to thank them, Troy, because we do apologize that we couldn't work like we have been working for 10 years and taking care of things for 10 years. But we had to adapt to this urgent catastrophe, this calamity. And for those who can't really understand it because maybe they didn't get it in their area, everybody is not affected in the same way, depending on where you live and etc. But if anyone has lived through a hurricane, an earthquake, a tidal wave, that's the type of effect that we were feeling here with COVID-19.
Okay, I want to touch on this and couple key things. People initially, I guess, when at the beginning people were getting calls and correspondence, you would put things underway where people were getting even messages setting up timelines and deadlines. When did you realize, when did you realize that you had to shift from your normal 2 to 7 day to 4 to 6 weeks? When did you realize that had to happen? Because some people had different messages and they say, I talked to somebody and then I asked for a refund, or I asked for this and I asked for that. No one called me, no one called me, no one called me. So
Right.
What happened to the customer service system versus the mail system? Because like you said, it seems like it was total calamity. And one of the biggest questions I'm going to get to is why didn't you, people say, why didn't you stop taking orders? Now, you mentioned something to me. I'm not going to mention the exact numbers. I don't know for all business out there, but I mean, there's no way to say it. If you're going through hundreds of orders a month to thousands of orders in 2 weeks, that was the transition. Like, but you said it was pretty much like you come the next day, there's 5,000 emails and who knows how many orders, you know? So was that pretty much that was the transition? When did you, because you're kind of a one-man show in that you are the CEO, it comes back to you, but then the people are gone. So how did you figure out what was going on?
I don't want to say, I don't, and people have misunderstood, and some people have taken it to believe upon themselves that I am a one-man show. So I want to be clear, I'm not a one-man show. I'm not the guy running around trying to do everything. We have staff. That staff has grown. We'll talk a little bit about that, how that happened, and the difficulty of making that happen. But basically, it sort of took place like this. In March, to my recollection, somewhere around, second week of March, we started noticing an increase in a trend in the volume of customers that began ordering. Now, these in the beginning were numbers that we could handle. In my prior interview, I had mentioned that several years ago, we experienced what we thought then was a surge. Nothing like what we have experienced as of late. But
yeah, and to mention that came along with the initial Black Lives Matter movement too, and the divest and invest, right?
During the time when what was going on in Ferguson, Trayvon Martin, during that time, Mike Brown, etc. Even here with what took place in Baltimore, that's when we saw those kind of surges. However, we were able to learn from that experience. And so we began to sort of develop a model for, let's say, being able to quickly and swiftly turn up the volume of product that we're able to get out, turn up our production capacity, if you will. And so when we saw the initial influx of customers, we did just that. And we began to go into our planning stages and put these things into action. However, this environment was changing swiftly, literally every single day. There would be mornings we would wake up and there would literally be thousands of new customers, on top of the fact that we then begin to experience the destruction of some of the technology that we have. And so what people might want to understand is that businesses, or in business, there is an element called economy of scale. And so what a lot of people don't know, unless they're in business or have studied business, is that when we talk about small business, it's not just about how much money the business makes, but it's about the business basic ability to have resources, utilize those resources, et cetera, et cetera. And so, to use an analogy, we went from something like the local hardware store, if you can imagine in your community, that it's okay. It can take care of the community. It can take care of maybe more than the community. People from outside of the community can come in and buy. But if all of a sudden, in a matter of a week, you have to go from being the local hardware store to Home Depot, that's one hell of a drastic change.
Now, why didn't, and this is something that I know many people said, okay, they couldn't handle the capacity we're trying. Why didn't you just stop taking orders? Why didn't you just stop at a certain point and say, okay, let's not take any more orders. Let's try our best to fulfill what's happening. And I'm not even talking about the mail service and what was going on there in your mail system, because you had a digital mail system you mentioned. But why didn't you just stop taking orders?
Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, again, as I mentioned, we were handling the capacity and believed that we could continue on handling it with all the necessary things that were taking place. And we had to address a whole slew of things as they were coming in. We were mounting up and putting people into place. We were hiring auxiliary people to come in. But then, of course, there were a number of dynamics that were changing. And most of all, we couldn't just drop the ball, because even doing that or stopping in the midst of some of the technological breakdowns, even as we're finding out even today, where there are customers that were sort of obscure in the system, and we didn't even know where they were, or we're finding them even now. This is why some people are saying that they hadn't gotten orders from as far back as March. It has not been until they have reached out to us that we actually have seen them. Now, some customers will say, well, your system took our money. Well, we're not, the system that takes the money is a banking system that takes the money. The credit card system or the merchant cash system that we utilize actually does that. And it interfaces with our shipping system. And so on 3 occasions, the shipping system broke down. And there were times when orders were coming in that were not being recorded in the shipping system. And so there were a number of dynamics that were taking place. All of the time, we were making the necessary steps and changes to address the issues that we could see, but there were issues we couldn't see. By the time we took control of it, then we begin to start to see the whole picture, and then we're infusing solution-orientated processes to begin able to address everything.
And I have to, and not send you a little bit more. You can get more centered in the so we don't lose you. I have to, like I said, I have to really commend you for taking time to do this, because as small business owners, as people that I've been through crazy ups and downs with everything. Any entrepreneur on here that's watching, knows it's hard. And like I said, I know people that haven't made it through this. And we don't get to talk to a company that's surviving while going through it. Like you mentioned, some of the bigger companies, when we hear about, hearing about Jeff Bezos talk about, he's talking to somebody, he's giving him all these props, and he said, everything you do goes great. And he said, and his face got dry. He said, no, it doesn't. He said, you just weren't around for my huge losses. Jay-Z was talking about the dude whose sons played basketball. And he said, LeVar Ball, we might not really appreciate how he talked or think he's this and think he's that. He said, but I bought 3 pair. He said, I never got them. But he said, I bought them. He said, but do I stop supporting him on the way up for the way he's doing it? And that's kind of my I understand. Believe me, I understand what some of these customers are saying. So I want to make sure that we're covering some of the key things. The Better Business Bureau and PayPal and started going through a lot of those things. And a lot of those measures were in place to also protect the customers so that they could set up refunds, stuff like that. But when we talked in the previous interview, on a pre-interview to this one, I should say, you mentioned that in the midst of everything, you had an 8-year-long policy of no refunds, but of not giving a refund, about 8 years of not giving a refund, but also the fact of you still worked within PayPal and Better Business Bureau to try to make everything lay out for the customers. All right. Why did you start a no refund policy at all? Even though it's a little different, because I guess the people didn't get their order, so it wasn't like, I understand when you get into somewhere, someone delivering something back, but because some people, their complaint was, I wanted a refund, and then all of a sudden I got my order.
Well, there were all sorts of things that were going on. Some people wanted refunds after they got their orders. Some people were attempting to manipulate systems themselves and actually defraud us. We have clear records and
indications. The ones that didn't, because I know you mentioned, but let's talk about for the ones that didn't, because we're gonna have to do something. Well, I got a separate question for that, the maliciousness of certain things that happen. That's something. I'm just talking about for the people who earnestly were just trying to support freedom right now.
Yes, sir. So again, we've been around for 10 years. And even if anyone would talk to the Better Business Bureau directly, the Better Business Bureau said to us in the beginning, because we were calling them when we saw the complaints, we reached out to them because we care. And the lady, Miss Clay, who we talked to there initially, said to us, Mr. Muhammad, I'm so happy that you reached out to us. Every business in your industry is going through the same thing right now. We're getting numerous complaints from other businesses like yours that are in the essential goods industry. And she said, I'm so happy because most of them have not reached back out to us. And then she told me directly, we've never had any complaint about your business in 10 years. So the reason for our no refund policy is we are a small business. Every penny counts here. When we, in this industry, Troy, you should know, multi-billion-dollar corporations in it. We're a small guy growing. We have a niche. We're doing some very unique things. We make some very wonderful products that don't have some of the poisonous chemicals, etc., that are found in some of the larger firms. But every little penny really does make a difference. And so we do ask people to simply be sure that when you make the purchase, you really want the purchase. And that's why we have a no refund policy. We did notice early on that there were people who simply abused the privilege of buying product. And even after we would
this was prior, put it in early on in business.
Well, your question was, why did we have this policy 8 years ago? We put the policy in place because we noticed that there was some abuse where people would order, we would literally have it gone and shipped. And then they would attempt to cancel the order after the product had left our warehouse. So we put this kind of policy in place. And this policy, this type of no refund policy certainly isn't abnormal. There are a number of companies that have no refund policies, and nobody complained about the policy for all of this time. And even Troy, I'll tell you, and you may get into it in another question, but even some of the people who had not so good things to say about Freedom Paper Company, you know what happened? When they did get the product, they said, wow, I'm quite surprised. The product is really pretty good. so yes, you know, we admit, and we're not happy about some of these things that have taken place. I take it to heart. I work very diligently. My staff, everyone here works very diligently. And we like people to be happy with the resultant effect of doing business with us. And our promise is you're going to be happy again. Just stick in there with us. And you're going to be happy because we're producing high quality products. And the resultant of that is not just monetary, but the effects of what we've been calling for 10 years, the new economic paradigm that is beneficial to people at large.
I have to talk about this because I understand where it gets to the point where people who, as you have mentioned, you started realizing that some people had reached out 5 times before you got an email. Some people had called, reached out, did different things, and then you finally got to them. And you said you talked to some people, and they were like, "Oh, you're the owner?" You're like, "Yeah, how can I help you?" And then it got to a point where, even though you had the no refund policy, you actually mentioned that, Troy, we started doing 2 things. We started asking them, do you want your product or do you want a refund? And there's a process, there's a system. I want to jump back a little bit to the Facebook, what started happening there and why you started shutting down comments and stuff on the social media side. There became a malicious, you said it got pretty malicious. Why do you think? Because well, in all actuality, if I've had a business situation and went sour and it was my fault, it was my fault. Once something happens past that, you know, you don't know how the person is going to carry it. But the maliciousness, when you said there became a Facebook group or people starting fake names, and I saw it because it came across my piece and they wanted to add and talk to me. And since you did the interview, I was like, who is this? And I specifically, and if they're watching now, they know, I specifically said, who is this? And why are you contacting me? And it was like the misery loves company thing. So I'm personally saying this. You didn't say it. I'm saying it because I got contacted and people started saying, well, you need to know that this company's doing this, and they stealing money and scamming and stuff like that. And that bothered me because I know the validity of the company. And even though you were busy when I emailed, when I called and was asking what was going on and the hectic scenario that was happening, we and some other partners could still get in touch with you. You were still going in every day. You were still doing 15 and 17 hours a day. So why do you think it became so malicious? And don't get me wrong, some people, you mentioned, some people's orders could scale up to hundreds, because we asked all the questions for it. Some people's orders could scale up to hundreds of dollars, but some people were spending 50, 25. It's a hard time, but where did maliciousness come, and why do you think they built a group? And you said you weren't sure if this group wanted answers or they just wanted to see Freedom Paper Company close. Where did the maliciousness come there? Because that's something I have a problem with.
There's a lot potentially to that, and I'm certainly not able to read minds or hearts necessarily. But some of it is sort of like the mad hysteria circumstance. It's kind of like we're all sitting in the movie house watching and enjoying the movie, and somebody yells fire and a panic breaks out. And so at the moment that the person yells fire, we're all going to die. people are just hysterical. They're running around. They're trying to get out the building. Now, nobody has necessarily seen the fire. Nobody has necessarily seen the fire, but somebody yelled fire. So we're all taking it serious because we feel threatened. And that's kind of one of the scenarios that we saw take place. Again, there were new people. And some of the comments that I've seen was like, oh, there are people on Facebook saying this. And because these people on Facebook say this, it must be true. Well, we know that that's a fantasy. Just because somebody says anything at any time or anywhere doesn't make it the truth. Some people, and of course, to take responsibility, we could not get messages out. We couldn't initially be able to answer people as quickly as we normally could. We hired more customer service staff, but there were literally thousands and thousands of emails. And then people exploited things as well. We began to tell people, leave one message, leave one email, give us an opportunity to respond back to you. That wasn't happening. People would leave 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 emails. So it was a preponderance of things happening that way. And then when you had false messaging going out and people hearing the false messaging on top of they weren't able to get us, then some people began to believe some of the things they were hearing. That's number one. Number two, we were told that in the case of this Facebook group, that one of its founding parties, if you will, was upset because they got an answer that they didn't like from a customer service person. And they decided that they were going to take on a vendetta against us and that they were going to destroy us. Now, you know, this takes me into some other things that are pretty deep, but among my people of African descent, we have to be very cautious of these kinds of mentalities and thoughts processes, because we have been sometimes the very people, while we're saying Black Lives Matter, while we're protesting in the streets, while we're fighting for our voting rights and our other rights, we sometimes have been the very same people who have been guilty of destroying the institutions and infrastructures that are attempting to be built. And so we need to pause a bit when we become so bent on vengeance of any sort. When something, you know, relatively small, Freedom Paper Company hasn't caused anybody any harm. We haven't hurt anybody in the streets. We're not putting guns in nobody's heads. We're not seeking to harm anybody. And even if we're late on your tissue, Troy, if we're late on your tissue, are you going to go to the bathroom next week? Now, I understand. I'm a consumer too. I ordered products. I was upset when I ordered my vitamins from my vitamin shop that I go to, Natural Vitamin Store, 20 minutes from my house. It took 6 weeks to get my vitamins, but I understood.
And we understand. We talked a little bit about this, and I want to harp on it because they've helped tremendously, the Postal Service, stuff like that. Not knowing at the time what was going on with the Postal Service, obviously there's some stuff, junk there. But on your own onus, because like I say, we know if somebody, I'm hand to hand with some of the stuff I do. If I say I'm going to do something for somebody, I don't do it, and then it comes, the issue is between us. But like you say, Freedom Paper Company was not just you, even though you're the figurehead. It wasn't just you, but what are you doing? Let's move forward. What have you done to change the process? Because you said you're still taking care of people who, between orders and refund, and like I said, even though you had a policy with no refunds, you still were in the midst of your system and dealing with PayPal and them, that y'all worked, like you were working hand in hand with PayPal and the Better Business Bureau, like still. Absolutely. So to provide refunds and do your best. What are you doing now? I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine how you go forward. You know what I'm saying? function now.
We still have a no refund policy. I want to say that. However, we have, because of the pandemic, looked at things on a case by case basis,
Right.
and then on some of those occasions we've issued refunds. Systems like PayPal are really there to act on the interests of all parties. They're a mediator of sorts. They're not cheering for us or cheering for the customer, and that's righteous. They're looking at each situation case by case, and then they're attempting to help the parties come to a reasonable agreement. So that helps. It helps as well.
I guess I'm saying, what have you put in place to try to process things better, do better customer service?
Let me tell you what has happened from this point. So again, to use that analogy from the local hardware store to the Home Depot, what does Home Depot have? It has infrastructure. It has a number of systems in place that can handle what is estimated to be the volume of customers, the volume of products that it may need to sell, not just in one store, but across the country. And so in like sense, what we've been able to do is we had to raise the level of everything that we're doing now to be able to handle not only today's volume of customers, but tomorrow's. And so we've forecasted well beyond even the pandemic. Now, this, of course, everything is a growing or a step-by-step module of development, if you will. And so we've gone out and brought in new technological systems that do things such as ticketing, where when customers now initially get into our system, they send us an email. First of all, because this is really important, Troy, people were sending emails everywhere. There were postings of phone numbers and arbitrary email addresses, some of which went nowhere. People were sending emails to emails that say do not reply. So there were all kinds of things going on. So number one, we had to bring some order. And so we're directing people how to communicate with us so that we can communicate better. So there are two email addresses: customer service at freedompapercompany.com and where is my product, fpc@gmail.com. There's a new 800 number, 1-855-496-8458. There's systems now that handle this traffic. And so we're using a little bit of AI now, artificial intelligence, where the systems pick up keywords when customers write an email and begin to put these emails in specific places for us to be able to go get them and be able to respond quicker. And I think customers have been saying to us that they are beginning to notice a difference. They are beginning to see a quicker response time, a quicker turnaround of getting these orders out, because we still do have a bit of a backlog, but that backlog certainly has been reduced at this point by over 60, close to 70%, and we're vastly catching up. So that's one system that we've put in place.
Let me interject something. Sorry, I didn't. It's not COVID. Calm down, people. Because you got it now.
Don't get in trouble.
Yeah, you got to let everybody know.
Yeah.
Don't.
But
let me say this. And this is what, all due respect to those who are going through the process, may still be waiting. We're talking about. I just have to say it. Sorry. We're talking about 10,000 orders in less than a month, and about 100 complaints. So we're talking about a 1% complaint ratio on something that, if you're a business owner in any way, shape, or form, and your business sprung up, it's you and your office and your function, your business sprung up, and you had to put out 10,000 orders, But I gotta say this because, like I said, we've talked in detail, and even though we don't have a lot of time, we got to get this stuff in. We've talked in detail, but not being able to increase your staff initially, you had to wait. You said you had to wait upwards of 3 months to increase your staff properly. So that's the thing that I think some people may not understand. Whereas some people are like, well, I just want my order. That's great. Let me hit on this before, because I know time is short. Let me hit on this. The purpose of Freedom Paper Company. What is your core purpose and mission for the company? And because in the midst of all this, you guys did something with people I'm near and dear to, Eartha Harris, Art Social Club, stuff like that. And you actually, because some stuff was returned, you had a lot of stuff that was returned from people that's like, I don't want it, send it back, whatever. It wasn't damaged, it was returned. And you did you didn't resell it, you gave it away.
Yes, sir. I mean, our core principles have remained the same and will continue to remain the same. We've always been about the community. We've always been about economic growth and economic power in the community. And so even though, some people sent products back, we believe that some of that was, a bit evil intentioned, let's say. But we understand. But we saw an opportunity to do some good. As you said earlier, people have lost their jobs due to this situation. People are not, in many cases, are not working, can't find new employment. I think when the index came out for the unemployment rates, we saw that they were higher and still growing. And so we saw an opportunity to do in collaboration with the Project Million More's movement, Eartha Harris, the Art Social Club, and a number of other community organizations here in Baltimore to do a giveaway for people who needed essential products and food products. The Art Social Club, I think, working in conjunction with one of the state agencies here, was giving away food. And so we were able to give away some of these essential products, bathroom tissue, paper towels, etc., to help people who needed it the most. So we were able to take what some people may have viewed as, voicing their displeasure, let's say in the least, we were able to take that and do something good with it, which again has always been one of our core principles. The other thing, Troy, that we've been able to do out of this is to actually provide more jobs in the community, and in particular to those who find it most difficult to find employment. In this case, I'm talking about people returning home from the prison industrial complex. And so we've been able to hire quite a number of people. We've gone from that average number of 7 to 25 people at this point.
You went from 7 people to 25 people finally. But you need to understand this. Yes. This happened. You did this hire within less than 30 days or about 30 days?
Well, listen, anybody who's in business knows this. Hiring people is a process. In fact, let's just, as they say, let's keep it real. When we get a job, when anybody goes and gets a job, you don't get to the job and know everything immediately. You have to be trained. You go through some training process. You got to learn the job. You got to become familiar with the people you work with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So we had to go through all of that. And of course, we hired people and some of them didn't last. We hired people and they didn't pan out. So this hiring process has been going on in totality over the 6-month period. And again, while we're doing all of this, because we couldn't just stack people and stuff them in the warehouse, we had to keep the necessary protocols of distancing, cleaning down and wiping down the warehouse and making sure things were sanitized. All of these things are things we didn't used to have to do. that we now have to do, which of course take time, energy, and effort. So all of that had to be managed and handled properly. And now we've gotten to the point where we've got some good core people who have learned their job. Note what I say, have learned their jobs. And so none of us walk into an employment environment and necessarily overnight, we just know the job. And even if we've had experience in it, right? When you work for a new company, you learn their systems of operation. And so our people had to do that as well. And so there's a learning curve and a growth curve. And that's why people will begin to see more of what they're used to, especially those customers that have been around. They'll begin to see more of what they've been used to, which is the quality customer care that they've gotten from Freedom Paper Company over the last 10 years.
On a positive note, you're still not just doing stuff in the community, but you're still training people in business, and you're still functioning and hiring and doing things like that.
Yes.
So, well, before we get out of here, I guess, because we, like I said,
I got to mention this, Troy, because you said earlier, before any of this broke out, one of the things you noticed that I was doing a lot of traveling, and people need to know, even as a small, remotely small entity, Freedom Paper Company has a bit of prominence. We were hired to go into another city in New Jersey, Newark, and develop there a company for the city of Newark, which the mayor there, the Honorable Ras Baraka, wanted to do something for, again, our key principle, people in the community. He wanted to create, because Newark, before the pandemic, was seeing an increase in its growth as a city.
Yeah.
And what happens often is when cities see what they call economic development take place, it is the average everyday citizen that does not normally see the benefit of that economic development.
Right.
Well, Mayor Ras Baraka determined that he would do something different, that he wanted to see that kind of real development take place at the base grassroots level. And Freedom Paper Company was hired to help develop a distribution company in the city of Newark so that the average everyday citizen could not only get a job, Troy, but be part of a business. And so our acumen and our ability to do what we do, even at the level that we do it at, because like many small businesses, we don't necessarily have the access to capital. We've been faced with redlining, predatory lending, and these kind of things. We still have to be aware of. We've had to walk through those challenges as a small business, a quote minority-owned business, and yet we thrived nonetheless. So that's who we are at our core. That's what we do. That's what we're doing. Not to mention the number of other small businesses that have developed from us directly as distributors, the other businesses that are small manufacturers that make products for us. We're helping their growth and development and volume. And some of the most well-known businesses in the quote African-American community that people are familiar with, some of them got their start with us. That's who Freedom Paper Company is.
Well, I'll say this last, and I'll save this one for last. I guess what would you like to say to everybody? We kind of know. No, I don't know. I know the breakdowns of systems. I guess what are you most, I won't say sorry or apologetic about, or what is the most, if anything, what's the thing that hit you the hardest that you wish you had done better initially? And what do you have to say going forward to people and the customers and the people that looking to influence more?
Well, I again offer my most humble apologies. I think, Troy, what bothered me the most was our inability to communicate effectively to get information out, to be able to put to rest some of the rumors and slanders and lies that have gone out about us, that were taking place. We've never scammed anybody. That was very hurtful to me personally. We've never done that to anyone. So that's the biggest thing. And in fact, we even teach communication skills in our business development classes. And so that's one of the biggest things. And that's why we searched and looked for a very robust system. And it too has kinks. People need to understand technology has a lot of kinks. And again, as we're growing and developing, we're able now to have tech people on staff. We can't yet pay them 24 hours a day, but we now have a dedicated tech person on staff who can look at these kinds of things and handle them. We're continuing to look at technology at large and the types of things we can continue to bring on board. So we're forward thinking. And if such a thing, and unfortunately, there probably will be other circumstances that take place. But one of the real good things, Troy, is we never ran out of product. We couldn't get product to everybody as quickly as we wanted to, but we've had product in stock. I never heard people attack some of the major retailers of this century when they all ran out of product. But the little engine that could, Freedom Paper Company, was here for the people with product, delivering to them. And we delivered to thousands and thousands of people. We have emails where people were sending us saying, my mother, my grandmother, she doesn't have any product. Can you please get her some bathroom tissue? These are heartfelt stories that I could tell with some of the emails that we received from people. And then the thank you, because that elder couldn't get out the house. So, people talk about this and that. And unfortunately, sometimes the good stories never get told.
Right.
But we want to share some of those stories. And we hope that those customers who we did serve well, those customers that know us, those customers who had a good experience, even during the pandemic, that they too would speak out, that they too would write a good review, because we did a lot of good, even in the midst of this worldwide catastrophe, which is it's something that even still entire governments are trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And yet this baby company was able to, by the grace of the Most High and the ancestors, do our very best, continue to do so, and thank God we're still here.
Yeah. Kamose Muhammad, Freedom Paper Company. I know I said it'd be short, but we're going to put part of this on IGTV. But I wanted to give you your say, because we've talked in spurts. But I also know that you hadn't had a chance to do media. Most people don't realize that you had been working 15 to 17 hours a day.
18 hours a day, March, April, May, June, without let up, literally 7 days a week for those first 3 months. And then we toned the Sunday down to 12 hours. We've been in the trenches. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I applaud you, brother. I hope this helps somebody, and it's helped me. It's helped. I always say that I have a certain team, and I tell people all the time, I have a certain team of people that I deal with and work with, and I appreciate. And let it be known for anybody that, I'll put it on the post as well. But this is not the piece for negative comments, negative review, this and that, especially when a company continues to give you information on how to get in touch with them. So there's, you got your new phone number, make sure I have it below, new phone number, website, and new products. You got new products you're putting out there. You're doing things on the commercial side. I'm learning from you just like any other entrepreneur should, we don't get a chance to talk to CEOs in the midst of the crisis. And we know the world is at crisis right now. And I'm thankful you're doing what you're doing. All the best going forward. And we'll definitely be talking again soon. I want to talk to you, God willing, we can talk on the other side of this and talk about this next year and the year after that on how it increased your business, because that's where a lot of companies thrive, on the other side of hardships. So being there for the people. And you said initially in the first interview, that's why you chose this business, because it was something that people would always need.
And Troy, hopefully we can do something to further educate the community about economics, what's going on here in the U.S. economically, what the impacts are, what's going on really throughout the world, how things are really changing. We have said it, we represent the new economic paradigm, and nothing has grown overnight. And so even these multi-billion-dollar corporations that you see, that we see around us, they've all come along over time. Many of them, some of them have roots back in the 1700s, who still exist today. But all of them that you see that seemingly grow quickly still took years, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 years, and they did it with the capital resources needed. But things are changing, and we see many of them even now falling and going into bankruptcy. We believe that Freedom Paper Company represents the future. And so even though we may have our hiccups, rest assured that people can have faith that as strong as we were in the first 10 years, that this next 10 years will be even better and stronger.
Appreciate your time, Kamose Muhammad. I know I got you in the wee hours before you put your head down a bit and get back to it. And we hope this helps somebody out there in the midst of this time, dealing with some questions. And I know we could have took another 2 hours, but I really wanted to hear how you survive and how you move forward. And I appreciate you taking some time out and letting us know what's what. And look forward to talking again soon.
Appreciate you, Troy, and peace and blessings to the family. Stay safe, everyone.
You as well.